guys! Today's video is going to walk you through the process of evaluating a written text. You'll see examples from the reading we've done together, and you'll get templates that show you how to structure your thesis statement and topic sentences for your essay. So let's get started. First of all, what does it mean to evaluate a text? Well, evaluate is just a fancy word for judge. So when you apply that definition to a text, it means you judge the text's strengths and weaknesses and decide whether it did what it set out to do with the people that it set out to reach. Now, it's important to remember that an evaluation or a review or a critique, all the same meaning, is an argument. So you need to take a position and support or prove that that's the best position to take. A rhetorical evaluation will build on rhetorical analysis. So once you've taken apart the text to figure out what it is, what it wants to do, and with whom, then you can make the judgment, but not before. So if you feel like you need a refresher, go back to part 1 of this series and watch that video again. Yeah, I know it was slow, it wasn't that great, but give it another chance. Now you might be wondering, why is this important? Well, first of all, evaluating others' writing helps you learn from their mistakes and from their successes so that you can emulate the things that work and avoid the problems that they ran into. Second, learning how to evaluate using specific details from the text also helps you give reliable feedback, advice, and reviews that others can use. Think about a Yelp review that only uses words like great and tasty. How likely are you to believe that reviewer over someone who describes the food and service in concrete details, tells a story about their experience, and explains the reasons they only gave 1 star? Being specific and logical, even about our personal opinions, builds credibility and can be really useful in peer review too. Finally, evaluating things you read and see helps you shape your own opinions and be able to defend them in a skilled way. The more practice you have figuring out what you like and don't like in life, and why, the more you're able to build the life and the body of work that you want. Make sense? Then let's start talking about how to do this. When you want to evaluate a text, start by being open. Take notes on what you think and what others have to say as well. Second, be sharp. Look out for evidence in the text that lets you know whether or not it succeeds at, well, persuading or convincing or informing you about its thesis, or reaching its audience in the right way. Once you've gathered all the information, be decisive. Weigh the pros versus the cons and take your stance. But as you express your thesis, be smooth. You want to summarize your judgment and the key moves from the text that support or prove your judgment in a way that clearly lets the reader know what you think and why. Now let's go into a little bit more detail about being open. So what you think and feel matters. Take notes on it. You can annotate the text directly in your book or on a photocopy, or you can use your own paper to make a chart like the one on your screen. Notice that most of the room on the chart is for the notes from the text. This is where you'll write down what you notice for good, bad, or neutral that influences your judgment. But don't just think about what you think. Fact check the authors or look for second opinions. So verify the information that you're given with other reputable sources. Do the dates, names, numbers, and explanations that the author gives line up with what other people have to say? Also check and see what people in the target audience have to say. Do they like the text or do they dislike it? And why? Look around for other reviews or critiques. As you take your notes, be sharp, especially as you evaluate how the text handles its reason or purpose and thesis. So ask yourself, does the text do what it sets out to do? Do you agree with the thesis? Or does this lead you elsewhere, perhaps in the opposite direction or in circles? Think about whether or not the text is clear. Can you tell what the author is talking about and why? Where does it seem pointless, vague, or confusing? Also think about evidence. Is there enough concrete proof to convince you, or do you need more? Is the evidence the author has given truthful or fanciful, theoretical or real? Does the proof seem fully formed or kind of shaky? And who are the author's sources anyway? Also think about explanations. Does the author connect evidence and claims in a way that is logical or questionable? Did they explain how they reached their conclusions at all, or do you have to connect the dots? Think about consistency. Does the author contradict themselves without resolving it or even addressing it? And also objectivity or bias. Does the author discuss opposing opinions at all? Or do they pretend their way is the only way? If they do mention counterarguments, do they treat those ideas fairly, or do they dismiss or ridicule them? Think about the answers to all these questions, and if most of the answers are no, then your judgment will probably be negative or against the text. It doesn't achieve its mission in that case. But on the other hand, if most of your answers are yes, then it probably does. So here are my notes on the phenomenology of error and how it handles its mission and its thesis. Notice that I listed multiple points, both for and against the text, and that my notes include evidence from the text, along with paragraph numbers where that proof can be found. This is good practice for note taking. It helps you have specific examples and proof to put in your paper later so that you avoid being vague, but it also gives you specific page or paragraph numbers for your citations so that you can avoid accidental plagiarism. You also want to be sharp when you're evaluating the text fit with its audience and its format. So you want to ask yourself, does this text shape its message in ways that reach or help or influence the right people in the right ways? Or does it offend, bore, or overwhelm them? Think about whether or not the text is accessible. Is the text legible? Or is it a speech for the deaf or a photo essay for the blind? Is the font too small? Does it need images where it uses words? Or vice versa? Think about respect as well. Does the author show consideration for the audience's intelligence, or does the author talk down to them? How does the author treat the audience's values, beliefs, and interests? As always, consider clarity. Does the text use vocabulary and syntax as the audience understands? Or do they need a thesaurus or a translator every 2 words? Now, being relatable or engaging is really important too. Does the author project a personality that the audience might like or agree with? Is the tone impatient or understanding, pleasant or outraged? Does the physical layout of the text, including colors, images, and even fonts, invite readers, ignore readers, or ignite readers? And finally, ask yourself if this is an appropriate choice of form for the audience. Does the shape of this message suit its content and its audience? Or is it the equivalent of telling a dirty joke at a minister's funeral? Again, ask all of these questions, and if most answers are no, then This author probably didn't make good choices about how to address their audience. Or if they were given a format, they didn't use the format very well. Here are my notes about the phenomenology of error and its use of format in its approach to its audience. Notice that I take into account the visual style as well as the content, and I take a guess at why I might have struggled with the text a little bit, even though I'm a college professor. I think part of the reason might have been because there's some English teachers who are research fellows, which means they teach freshmen composition like I do, but they also get a decreased workload for doing research into linguistics. And maybe those are the people that Joseph Williams is talking to. Once you've taken a lot of notes and consulted others to make sure you're on the right track, you're ready to put in your oar. So weigh the pros versus the cons and see which one holds more sway. Now you may have a tie. There may be an equal number of pros and cons, but that probably tells you that the text ultimately fails in its attempts. After all, if you're still neutral, it hasn't convinced or persuaded you very much. Now here's my list of pros and cons from the notes that you just saw. Now on my list, there's about twice as many pros as cons. Most of my cons are on the visual side. The diagrams and the block quotes made it a little bit forbidding to me. And the vocabulary and the sentences were a little bit technical, which kind of conflicted with the fact that Joseph Williams uses first person and tells personal stories, so it seemed conversational but also very technical. And that seemed to conflict a little bit. But then on the other side, there's all these other reasons why he convinces me despite what the text looks like. So overall, I'd say it succeeds. It convinces me and in fact persuades me to change the way I used to grade. So now that you've made your decision, you need to be able to clearly and concisely tell people why you stand by this conclusion. Your notes are probably a bit informal or scattered, so a template can help you express your thoughts clearly. Here's one to try and revise as needed. Author or the text title. Does these key moves when he, she, or it, depending if you're talking about the author or the text, does this signal verb, and then a summary or a quote or a paraphrase or even a description from the text. Now that's a little abstract. So here's a sample body paragraph that focuses on one specific thing Joseph Williams did that helped persuade me to believe and to act on his thesis. Notice how I start the paragraph with a debatable statement about the quality of Williams' writing that is supported by a specific piece of evidence from the text. Williams convinces readers that error is unavoidable. That's his key move. When he lists numerous examples of errors that grammar experts have made. My signal verb is list, and then the summary, or perhaps the description, is all of those errors that he had. Next, I give an example from the text to prove that Williams really did this, and I cite the paragraph number so that any reader who wants to double check my work can do so. Next, I explain why this proves the point I made earlier in my topic sentence. This is a simple and strong way to organize every body paragraph. Start with a clear and debatable argument that supports your thesis. Then illustrate this point with an example, definition, description, or all three. And then explain how the illustration you just gave proves your original point in the topic sentence. This way, every reader knows just what you mean and can readily believe you. However, making body paragraphs isn't all you have to do. Those body paragraphs have to support a thesis, and that thesis must tell readers what overall judgment you've made about the text and the reasons why you believe that judgment. The good news is that you've already taken notes about these judgments and reasons. All you have to do is express them in 1 or 2 sentences that summarize your position and supporting reasons, as in the template below. Despite its key moves, usually for positive if you're going to say the text fails, or negative if you're going to say it succeeds, the whatever form the text takes, whatever the title of the text is, mostly succeeds at or fails to whatever reason or purpose you've determined the text wants, to whatever audience you've determined it's aimed toward. That, or 2, the thesis, because it, and then key moves from the text. So if you're saying it succeeds, you want to give key moves that are good moves. If you're saying it fails, you want to give the key moves that are not so good ones. Here's an example that ties together all my notes and ideas on the phenomenology of error. Notice how, with this template, you start with the ideas that oppose your stance before you explain your take on the text. This is just acknowledging the counter-arguments, and it helps build your ethos or credibility with readers too. You can include the author or creator's full name if it's not somewhere else in your introduction, as I have, just to ground readers in the full context of the piece. But that's optional. Notice how I include 3 different reasons why I believe the text succeeds. Because Williams convinces readers that error is unavoidable, because he proves that not all errors matter, and because he gives teachers concrete research and grading procedures to follow. Would my argument be stronger with just 2 reasons to support it? Talking about key moves is often one of the most difficult things for student writers to do. So here are some common ways to talk about the things authors do well or poorly in a text. Note that these words are all active verbs that convey or imply a judgment. That helps you get your message across as quickly and efficiently as possible. Use these words to set the stage for a summary, quote, paraphrase, or description that proves your point. So to summarize it, judgments aren't always bad. We judge things every day to survive and to make the best choices in our lives. So don't feel bad about judging people's texts. And rhetorical evaluation helps you understand writing and choose what to read and write better. And those are important choices, no matter what American society generally says. Now, there are a few steps to follow in order to make an informed decision, including being open, sharp as you take notes, decisive as you put together your ideas, and smooth as you express them. But there's a few templates that help you communicate ideas clearly and efficiently, and it can be tweaked anytime. If you have any questions, email me or leave a comment and I'll get back to you. I look forward to seeing you in class. Bye.